Presentation of the Thpo Historic Preservation Fund Grants End-of-Year Reporting from the National Park Service and the State Tribal Local Plans and Grants Division and the Thpo Historic Preservation Program. This presentation is for all Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, also known as Thpos, and others who have the responsibility of managing the Thpo office and grants. We'll review how to complete all of the required reports under your tribe's Historic Preservation Fund, or HPF, annual grant agreements, and your tribe's partnership agreement with the National Park Service and THPP. Submission of an annual accomplishments report is a requirement of the Thpo partnership agreement with the National Park Service that was created for your tribe to assume the duties of the State Historic Preservation Office on your tribal lands, and is also a requirement of your Thpo grant agreement. Because it is a requirement of the Thpo partnership agreement, all Thpos must submit this report regardless of whether the tribe has received HPF grant funding to support their historic preservation program. Tribes that receive Historic Preservation Fund HPF grants must also submit financial reports as part of the annual report and final report requirements under each grant. Your grant agreement will specify exactly what forms must be submitted and when the reports are due. Before we go through the reporting requirements in detail, let's first clarify how we will refer to the grants that you are submitting for annual and/or final reporting. The grant for which you are preparing the annual report will be referred to as the active grant because it has not yet expired. The grant for which you are preparing a final report will be referred to as the closeout grant because it has expired and you are now closing out the grant. The expiration date for your grant is on the first page of your grant agreement. Extensions are generally not allowed, but in recent years, COVID-19 has necessitated some extensions. If you have an extended grant, you may be filing 2 annual reports rather than closing one, or perhaps filing an annual report and closing out 2 grants. Each HPF grant agreement runs for 2 federal fiscal years. If your tribe received a grant in each of the last 2 federal fiscal years, you must submit an annual report under the active grant and a closeout final report under the closeout grant. The annual reports are due within 90 days after the end date of the fiscal year, and the closing/final report is due 120 days after. The fiscal year ends on September 30th, so both sets of reports are due by December 31st and January 31st. If you only receive funds under one of the fiscal years, then you will only need to submit the appropriate report due under that grant. Please take a moment to review this slide and understand how the active grant and the closeout grant overlap for 1 fiscal year. If you received both grants, you must separate out the charges incurred under each grant during the overlapping fiscal year when completing the required financial reports. We will now go over how to complete the basic required reports for each grant. This includes the accomplishments report and the annual and final financial reports. Please look in your grant agreement to see if your tribe is required to submit any additional reports other than those we discuss in this presentation. An annual accomplishments report is submitted as a requirement of your MPS partnership agreement. However, MPS also accepts this report in satisfaction of the progress report required as part of your active HPF grants annual report. So, they are a combined requirement for both the program and the grant. The information collected through this report should reflect the work done in the last federal fiscal year and includes information on survey and inventory activities, information on the identification and nomination of properties to the tribal register or the national register, information on educational activities and programs carried out during the fiscal year. This also includes the number of federal undertakings on tribal lands reviewed, the number of federal undertakings on ancestral lands reviewed, a description of Section 106 review activities, the total number of non-federal consultations, a description of other program activities paid for with grant funds or otherwise accomplished that you would like to share, and a place to submit photographs. These are optional, but very much appreciated. As with the other annual reports, the annual accomplishments report is due within 90 days of the end of the fiscal year. So again, it is due by December 31st. You must fill out the document in the link provided, as this is the only place that this report is accepted. If you have questions about the information collected on the annual accomplishments report, please contact the National Park Service Tribal Historic Preservation Program at Thpo_program@nps.gov. This is the program that monitors compliance with the Thpo Partnership Agreement. We will now move on to the financial reports due under your grant agreements. Annual financial reports due under the active grant must cover the first year of the grant period. That is the period from October of the year of the grant starts to September. Even if you have only received your grant closer to September, or if you haven't expended any funds, you still need to submit a report showing that little or no funds were expended. The reports required include, at a minimum, an annual SF-425 Federal Financial Report and an SF-428A Annual Tangible Personal Property Report. Once again, these are due by December 31st. Final financial reports due under the closeout grant must cover the full 2-year grant period and include, at a minimum, an SF-425 Federal Financial Report, an SF-428B Final Tangible Personal Property Report, and a final budget breakdown on an SF-424A non-construction budget form, following our program-specific instructions, which we will review in this training. And the reports are due by January 31st. The SF-425 Federal Financial Report is used to show the status of your tribe's obligations and expenditures under a grant for a specified period of time. An annual SF-425 is due under the active grant's annual report and should reflect the funds expended or obligated in the first year of the grant period. A final SF-425 is due under the closeout grant's final report and should reflect funds expended during the full 2-year grant period. The next several slides are annotated to show you what information goes into each field on the SF-425. The SF-425 can be completed directly in and through Grant Solutions. If you fill it outside this system, you can upload it to the FFR in the Grant Solutions system. We will discuss Grant Solutions in just a bit. Full instructions for completing this form can also be found on grants.gov under the tab Forms. As you can see here, the top section of the form is for the reporting of general information about the recipient and the grant agreement. Fields 10A through 10O of the form are where you enter information about cash transactions that have occurred during the reporting period. How this information is calculated depends on whether you're using the cash or accrual method of accounting. Fields 10A through 10C require information about federal award cash receipts and cash disbursements made by the tribe during the reporting period. Please pause this presentation to review the notations on this slide. Fields 10D through 10H are for reporting on your federal expenditures and any unobligated balance of funds remaining in the grant account. Please pause this presentation to review the annotations on this slide. Fields 10I through 10K are for reporting any matching share expended under the grant. Thpo grants do not include matching share, so these fields should be left blank. Field 11 of the SF425 is for reporting on the indirect cost rates, or IDCs, that the tribe has applied to the grant. You must have an approved indirect cost rate agreement covering the reporting period if your tribe is charging indirect costs to the grant. If more than one indirect cost rate was used under the grant, each rate must be listed separately. Please pause this presentation to review the annotations on this section of the SF425. The final section of the SF425 is simply the name, signature, date of signature, and contact information of the authorized certifying official. If filling out directly in Grant Solutions, the signature will be electronic and recorded through the system. The next financial report we'll review is the SF428A, Annual Tangible Personal Property Report. It is required as part of the Active Grants Annual Report Package. This report is used to account for all equipment purchased during the first year of your grant agreement. Equipment only includes non-expendable items costing $5,000 or more per unit, with a useful life of more than 1 year. Items not meeting this definition are considered supplies. In the form, you must include a description of each item purchased, its acquisition cost, and the date it was purchased. Per federal law, you must have received prior written approval to purchase any equipment for the cost of the equipment to be reimbursed under the grant. Even if you haven't purchased equipment, you must submit an SF428A, but you may simply complete the top section and write "No equipment purchased" in the body of the form. An SF428B, Final Tangible Personal Property Report, is required as part of the Closeout Grants Final Report Package. Here you'll provide a final list of equipment purchased under the grant and request specific disposition instructions for the equipment that was purchased. There are several disposition options on the form, including one to request that the tribe be given title to the equipment. Again, you must complete this form even if you haven't purchased equipment, but you can simply note that no property was purchased in the comments section. As part of the Closeout Grants Final Report, you must submit a breakdown of the final budget showing how the awarded funds were actually expended. You must use the SF424A non-construction budget form to do this. The final budget is compared to the planned budget approved as part of your grant agreement or to the last MPS approved budget modification. This form must be completed according to the Steel Pig program specific instructions that we will review here. The final budget is completed in Section B of the SF424A. Here the expenditures are broken out into 3 columns to separate out expenses related to administration costs, operation costs, and contractual costs. As you can see in this slide, administration costs, outlined in red, go in the first column. Operation costs, outlined in green, go in the second column. And contractual costs, outlined in blue, go in the third column. The breakdown of expenditures is used to confirm that no more than 25% of the awards were expended on administrative and indirect cost rates combined, as is required under 54 USC 302902D, and so that MPS can be more accurately report on how funds are being expended under this program. In the next few slides, we'll review what types of costs go under each category. Column 1, administrative costs, are reasonable and allocable costs related to the overall management of activities directly related to finance, general administration salaries and wages, and other overhead functions not directly attributable to specific program areas identified in the grant agreement. All administrative costs reported must absolutely necessary for project and program implementation, such as the cost items identified in the final grant agreement or items otherwise approved in writing by the NPS awarding officer, AO. Examples include accounting, auditing, budgeting, contracting, grant administration, property management, equal opportunity, general legal services, general liability insurance, depreciation on buildings and equipment. Column 2, Thpo operation costs, are those costs that are directly attributable to eligible Historic Preservation Fund program activities. Most of your costs will reside in this column. Eligible HPF programs include administration of program, historic preservation planning, survey and inventory, National Register programs, review and compliance, development, acquisition and covenants, preservation tax incentives, certified local government programs, and education other. Program cost activities may include personnel costs related to work completed under the HPF program areas, supplies and equipment needed to carry out the work under the program areas, and conference fees and travel expenses for Thpo program meetings or conferences. Column 3, contractual costs, are simply where you list operation costs from column B that were expended through contracts. Once you've completed your budget breakdown, check again to make sure that no more than 25% of the grant funds went toward administration costs, column A, line I, and total indirect costs, the total column of line J. All financial reports will be submitted to Grant Solutions. For the open grants, this includes the annual SF-425 Federal Financial Report and SF-428A, the Equipment Report. All grantees are required to obtain an account in Grant Solutions for reporting. If you have not completed this process, you can visit the FAQ section of Grant Solutions listed on this page. When you click on Start Report in Grant Solutions, it will open up the PPR page. There you can fill out the basic information such as the tribe name, etc. You do not need to enter any project description or narrative as you will be submitting the annual accomplishments report to another system. However, you will use the PPR to attach and submit your SF-428A equipment report. That is all you need to complete the annual PPR. Just attach the SF-428A. For the annual FFR, you or the accounting official will start and open the report and complete and sign the SF-425 online. If the person authorized to fill out the SF-425 does not have access to Grant Solutions, then you can attach the signed hard copy here to the FFR and submit it. Just as we covered on the annual reporting, all final financial reports for the closing grant will also be submitted to Grant Solutions. For the closing grants, this includes the final SF-425 Federal Financial Report, the SF424A, the final budget of actual expenditures, and the SF428B, equipment report. Again, equipment reports must be submitted even if no equipment was purchased with grant funds. You can attach the SF428B with the PPR and the SF424A final budget with the FFR. You can also find information on all the documents needed for both the annual and financial reporting on the How to Manage Your Thpo grant website listed on this slide. All grantees are required to obtain an account in Grant Solutions for reporting. There are different roles, and your financial department may have the responsibility of submitting some of the reporting, such as the SF425. Please check to see how your tribe organization handles the submission process. If you have not completed this process, you can check out the FAQ page on the Grant Solutions website. Additional training is also available on the Grant Solutions website. This training can help you navigate the different modules and tasks that you may need to do through the system, including amending your grant and submitting your reports. Please contact the Grant Solutions Help Desk if you have any questions regarding the system. Finally, if you need to contact MPS with questions about anything in this presentation, please send us an email and we'll respond as quickly as we can. Thank you.